right, and welcome into the Fighting Tater Show. It is September 19th, Thursday night. Here, you're in Mountain Time, right? You're in Utah here,
Yes, I
Ryan.
am. Yes, I
Okay,
am.
yeah, you're coming from your mom's house in Utah today. So glad you could join us.
Mom, meatloaf.
Yeah, right. So we are the Fighting Taters show. Ryan and I, each week we cover um, college athletics across the state of Idaho, and then what Idaho athletes who played their high school football or whatever sport they're playing in Idaho, kind of covering them and what they do after they leave Idaho, whether that's high level college athletics or even into the NFL. So we're going to get into some of that. We had Colston Loveland, early draft projections out for him. Now have him kind of mid to late first round. We'll get into that here in the next half hour or so. But we'll kind of kick things off. We're going to talk about U of I, tough road test for them here this week. ISU's got homecoming over in Pocatello, and finally, Boise State will play at home this week.
And it almost didn't happen too, right? Portland
Yeah,
State had the
right.
whooping cough outbreak, the pertussis, and they almost, they were this close to canceling that thing.
Yeah, thankfully they didn't, because this town, we've been just chomping at the bit to watch this football team play, and if you have to wait another week, I'm glad they got that one figured out. But I want to remind you that you can watch this show on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, the X account. You can also listen to the show on IdahoSports.com or wherever you download and subscribe to your podcast. And don't forget to share this podcast, leave a comment as well. We can share those as we go along throughout the show. Just drop your comments. We can drop them right here on the screen. Don't forget to like the podcast, share the podcast, helps us grow. And it's great to see a few of you jumping on here in the early couple minutes of this one as we get going here live on a Thursday night. So let's go ahead and get into it, Ryan. Okay, a week's passed now. We've had a week to digest this Pac-12 stuff. How are you feeling now compared to what we were saying last week, which you can go back and watch it if you want as well?
Yeah, so I think your initial gut feeling with UNLV, that's the talk, right? That's the hub, that's the buzz, is that they're going to pick up UNLV. So just for reference sake, they need to pick up the Pac-12 needs to pick up 2 more schools to become an official conference or to qualify to have a championship, to register with the NCAA. So UNLV is looking to be one of those, but I've heard all kinds of crazy rumors, all kinds. So you said this last week with Air Force joining the American and then joining up with the rest of the service academies. I'm telling you right now, it's looking like the Mountain West is going to be vulturized. It's going to get picked apart and all the little pieces back and forth. And essentially what you're going to get is you're going to get a couple of the best teams or some of the best teams from the Mountain West that are going to now join in the Pac-12. That's already happened. And then you're going to see other teams like New Mexico State, which is trying to get in and join the Mountain West. But what's left of the Mountain West, you're seeing a lot of movement that I don't know if it has a major impact on the power conferences other than we talked about, right? Stanford, Cal, maybe they come back, and then all of a sudden that ACC looks a little weak. SMU, maybe they get poached. Maybe they come over to the Pac-12. Maybe that's a better fit. I don't know. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Yeah, and after looking at this for a week, I think stuff is going to happen fairly quickly, and I think in college athletics, quickly can mean a year. Who knows? But I think this could happen fairly quickly because the Pac-12 has made their initial move. So now everyone else is kind of watching and on standby. The Mountain West needs to get into Texas right now. They need to start going after Texas State. They need to go after UTSA. They need to go after these other schools so then they don't jump ship somewhere else. So let's say the Mountain West loses another school or two, and now they can still get those exit fees and they can still essentially survive. But if I'm the Mountain West, I'm trying to get into Texas, and I'm trying to get into Texas right now.
Yeah, I think geographically that's a good fit. Flights aren't that bad all the way from Colorado. Going to the Pacific coast gets a little dicey, but not as big a deal. But here's the thing that I think is the most. Do you remember when the Sun Belt was like the darling? They had a year when Coastal Carolina, they had a couple other schools that played App State. A couple of these schools were just amazing, right? And they looked really good in the Sun Belt, and then Conference USA was before that. So it's like it almost feels like the flavor of the season for these um, group of 5 conferences. Who's hot right now? Who are the top teams? Let's poach them. Let's bring them over to our conference. And it feels a lot like that right now because Sun
Yeah.
Belt went through it, Conference USA went through that, AAC went through that to build their conference. It feels a lot like that. I don't know. I don't know if there's enough good teams to go around to make even a decent conference anymore.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing about it is like they need to get 2 more teams, as we said. I just think the way this happens, it just feels like it has to be UNLV and Memphis. It just feels like those have to be the 2 teams. So I don't know.
To,
We'll have to wait and see what
to get
happens.
the
But
most bang
yeah,
for your buck for the biggest markets, you're spot on.
yeah, and I just don't know. If Tulane does it for me, UTSA, that I think for this to be the conference that they want it to be, it has to be UNLV and it has to be Memphis.
I agree.
So we'll see how all that plays out. But back to football that's happening. So on Saturday, I guess we'll start here in Boise with Boise State. Finally, a home opener. We finally get to see Ashton Jeanty in his Heisman campaign play on the blue. We finally get to see this quarterback battle that took place over the offseason. We finally get to see it in person. And we get to see it under the lights. They play Portland State on Saturday. Should be a cakewalk for the most part for BSU, but I think for fans, it's just we're in the football now, right? And we've had a couple games already. They've already had a bye week. They haven't had a home game yet. If you just look at the way the tickets are going, like this right now for Boise State, they sold out their first 3 home games already. I mean, these fans are just chomping at the bit to watch this team play.
Yeah, and we talked about them losing to Oregon. I mean, this close to not losing. I think they played them a lot tighter, and I think that gives them I think that gives the Boise State fan base, the team in general, a lot to be happy about, and a lot to be excited about. I mean, to put it in perspective, Boise State hasn't sold out 3 straight home games. It's been years since they've done that, and they've had great years. They've won the Mountain West, but they have not been able to sell out 3 straight. And mind you, this is playing an FCS team in Portland State. Now, to your point, Ashton Jeanty is as advertised. I was just looking at his stats again because it's just mind-boggling, right? 2 games, 45 attempts, 466 yards for a net, and then a loss of 7 on some, tackles for losses. He has 459 yards in 2 games. He's averaging 10 yards a carry, 9 touchdowns, and 230 yards a game.
Yeah,
That's like Barry Sanders stuff, right? For you old folks out there who understand college football back in the day, Barry Sanders' Heisman run looked a lot like Ashton Jeanty right now.
Yeah, and he's done it against a legitimate defense, right? Went to Eugene and 1, 2, 3 tutties later. You know what I mean? So he's the real deal. I'm excited to watch him play. I'm unfortunately leaving town tomorrow for the Tri-Cities. I'm gonna be out for about a week, but we bought Washington State tickets the next home game next week. We bought those a couple weeks ago for it was like 60, 65 bucks. Those tickets are up over like 100, approaching $200 right now on third-party sites. I've never seen tickets that high for Boise State, and I've been here for 5 years talking to some of my friends who have lived here their whole life. I asked one of my buddies, I was like, were they this high even when the Kellen Moore era and all that? And he was like, no.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we should blame this on inflation that you can charge these prices, or we could blame it on love you guys to death, but California jacking up prices in the Treasure Valley. I don't know what we're blaming, or is it just really good Boise State football team and a lot of hype and quite frankly, just that hunger, right? Like that feeling of just we got our team, we got to do it. Biggest ticket in town, no professional sports team other than the Hawks and the Steelheads, but I'm talking about right now. I mean, there's a hunger and there's a plenty big fan base out there, and you're seeing those prices go through the roof.
Yeah, I've said for the last couple of years that the toughest ticket in Boise to a sporting event is the Idaho Steelheads. Trying to get a ticket to a Steelheads game. It's kind of getting to that point now where Boise State's kind of challenging them for that because ticket prices for the Wazoo game are up. Portland State, I'm sure I haven't looked at those, but I'm sure they're up there. Utah State's sold out.
Yep.
So if you want to go to a BSU game and you want to pay less than $100, Nevada, Oregon State.
Well, okay, so this is fantastic for the BSU sports program, just in general. And a lot of the big schools, the way they run it is that football program generates enough revenue to cover a lot of the other sports. And if you start getting to that point where you can charge a little bit more money per ticket, and it gets to that point, you start covering a lot more of it. Now, to be completely honest with you, I think it's a great thing. I think that they're talking there's talks of Albertson Stadium and closing the back end too, so you can have more seating. This goes a long way in giving a vote of confidence to the board of trustees, to everybody, to invest that money and close in that stadium.
Yeah, I just want to throw in a quick tidbit about the North End Zone project starting basically after this season. This is, I think, piece one of a multiple phase, just total renovation of the football stadium. They put the suites in first because that's how you generate revenue from seating. So, and then Boise State has a huge waiting list right now for tickets up at the Stuckel Sky Center. And so what's going to happen is everyone, I say everyone, these are companies that are buying these suites, right? People that are in Stuckel now are going to go to the new North End Zone suites. And then the people that are on the waiting list for Stuckel are going to go into Stuckel. Boise State's going to get a lot more revenue, a lot more ticketing revenue from these suites. They can sell them at a way higher price. Remember, these are companies buying these, trying to woo clients and, things like that. That extra revenue is then going to open up the door for them to do a lot more projects to this stadium. I think this is going to open the door to allow them to expand the concourses, which is something that they need to do in order to expand the stadium. Because remember, there's that track that that old track that they don't even use that goes around. So I think North End Zone comes first. Then you might see the South End Zone, maybe the East Side after that. But they have to do this first to get the funds kind of starting to roll in. Mm-hmm. So I think it's long term. I think it's a good play for Boise State. I know that those were the cheap tickets in the North End Zone. I get it. That's where my season tickets were. But this is a play for Boise State to eventually, I think, expand the stadium. They want to get this thing up to about a 50,000 seat capacity.
Yeah, 50,000 seats. Right now, you're looking to increase it by 15,000 because it's roughly 35,000 seats right now. That would be huge. And the fact, like I said, that they can sell it out is massive. I was just looking at the Big 12, some of the biggest stadiums. There are plenty of stadiums that are 35 to 40,000. Autzen Stadium in Eugene, I think it's only 45,000, 50,000. Then they were going to do an expansion. Yep. But if you sell it out, it's the atmosphere. Everybody knows the blue anyway. Anywhere I travel, where do you live? Boise State. Oh, you have blue turf. I'm like, yes. Yep. Yes.
Blue turf and potatoes.
Blue turf.
Yep.
They know it, right? It's a national brand. And if they can continue to grow it, I think that bodes well. Selling out is the first step towards that.
Yeah, definitely. And to do some of it, you remember when Luke Combs came to town a few summers ago, they had Garth Brooks show a couple times. They got really lucky with Luke Combs. They hit him right at the right time because right now with our infrastructure, Luke Combs ain't coming to Boise.
Couldn't handle it. Yep.
Right. But if they get this up to a 50,000 capacity, that's kind of the minimum threshold that a stadium needs to be to host these big time events. And Boise State wants to do that. They want to host these big concerts. They want to host these big events because Boise, we're kind of isolated, right? So 4.5 hours to Salt Lake City, 6 hours to Portland.
5. I just drove it.
Oh, okay. 5 hours. Yeah. So 5 hours to Portland. But point being, there's a lot of concerts and shows and things like that do Portland, Salt Lake City, and they drive right through Boise.
Yeah.
But if you have a 50,000 seat stadium, maybe they don't do it anymore.
Yeah, and maybe they do. And you have the amphitheaters so they can do those types of things. You can jam a ton of people in the amphitheaters over at the Ford Center. But what happens when the weather gets cold, right? You have to have the venue. And even if it's just in a stadium, they'll still do those things. Or seating and view wise, again, I'm not a huge concert guy, but the ones that I have been to at an amphitheater look a lot different than a stadium. A lot different.
Yeah. I mean, statewide, it's definitely the crown jewel of the sports facilities that we have. But when you look at it in a nationwide infrastructure, still a pretty small stadium. Kind of hard to think about, wrap your head around here in Idaho.
Yeah, well, it's so funny. It was I drove by Doak. See, what's it? Texas University of Texas Stadium. Doak.
Oh yeah, the Doak Campbell
Stadium, and it's right off the freeway, off of 35 as you're driving by in Austin. And you look over, and from the outside, it doesn't look that big, but it's sunk in. They dug down in, right, and you get high enough in there, and you look, and you're like, wow. We're not in the Mountain States anymore, are we?
Nope.
I mean, football is real. 100,000 fans at those things. Michigan, the Big House, just Alabama, Tennessee. Some of those places are just massive.
Yeah, they definitely are. So moving on here to University of Idaho. Impressive win last week for them, kind of avenging last year's playoff loss. They got another ranked team on the road, this time with Abilene Christian. Kind of ran through Albany last week. I mean, that game wasn't
even close.
Wasn't close. Ran through them.
Yeah, Dane, if you remember Dane Stewart that was on the show a little while ago, sent me a text message. He said, hey, you want me to come on and talk about the best defense in the state of Idaho?
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that he's wrong. I mean, they may have the best defense in the state of Idaho. I mean, no offense, Boise State, but, people struggle to put up some points. Oregon put up more points on Boise State than they did on versus Idaho. I'm just saying, they look impressively good.
Yeah. I think this is going to be their first real tough test. Just kind of Abilene Christian. Abilene Christian, this is the first time that their stadium has hosted a top 25 opponent at the FCS level, right? So just looking at some of their stuff, I think this game, their tickets are going pretty quick. I think that's going to be a pretty good atmosphere. Their quarterback has already thrown for over 1,000 yards, and Abilene Christian, it's got, they're obviously ranked, so they're having a good year too. But Idaho, I mean, with the win against Wyoming, hanging tough against Oregon, they got to be feeling good and rocking it all here with the backup quarterback too.
Yeah, Abilene Christian coming in at number 19 and University of Idaho is at number 4. Idaho got 3 first-place votes. Now, a couple things of note for Abilene Christian, because I lived in the great state of Texas for 3 years before I moved back to Idaho, and that was 8 years ago that I moved back. And one of the things that is the style of football, and it really, really translates to the FCS level teams and some of the smaller schools, I would say. Less football renowned schools, but we'll say FCS schools, is the wide open style of offense. What you see at the high school level, you're going to see at Abilene Christian. And the talent level where they have to recruit from, the talent bid is absolutely phenomenal. I remember I went to the 5A and then the 6A state championship game in Jerry's World.
How was that?
I'm just saying, man, it was unbelievable. And quite frankly, it almost filled the stadium. Now, they're not going to fill 80,000, but the lower bowl up to the sides, I mean, there were probably 50,000 people there for the 6A state championship. It was unbelievable. That's I digress. Incredible. Moral of the story is they run wide open offense. Abilene Christian throws the ball over. Think of poor man's Texas Tech. That air raid offense, getting the ball out there, everything quick. Mike Leach, his influence from Texas Tech, stayed at Texas Tech, permeated through the high school ranks, hit Abilene Christian, and that's kind of what you're going to get with Abilene Christian. Yeah. Idaho's going to have to put a lot of pressure. They're going to have to generate it with 4 people, 4 men on the defensive line. If every once in a while you can throw a blitz in there, but you just can't risk getting beat because they get the ball out so quick, and they have a lot of really good receivers. Abilene Christian does, but Idaho's going to have to generate a lot of pressure with a 4-man front.
Yeah, that for sure. And speaking of Texas Tech, Abilene Christian took Texas Tech to overtime. There you go.
Yeah. Well, and my buddy who went to Tech, he's funny. He's like, I was watching the game, and he's like, every other player transferred from Tech. If you go look at the Abilene Christian
Their
roster.
Quarterback included, I think.
Correct.
I think he's a Texas Tech transfer. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said that. I mean, you look at it, and they have probably 12 to 14 players that play that are all were at Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's Lubbock's right down the road, essentially, from it, right? Both two West Texas schools, and it makes sense. It makes sense why they're ranked it. They're having one of the best seasons I would think they've had in years. So you could just kind of sense the excitement from them. So I don't know. I think that's going to be a tough test for Idaho. I'm really interested. I think they could certainly win it, but I think Abilene Christian's a little bit better this year than what they just had with Albany.
Yes and no. I do think that defense is legit and top tier. I would say Abilene Christian's going to, and now Idaho's at a disadvantage, obviously playing with backup quarterbacks, plural,
Yeah,
throughout the
right.
season. But I don't think it's really going to matter. I think Idaho goes on the road and wins this one by a couple scores. 10 points. I'm going to give them by 10.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I'm kind of interested to see what they have, because I think the defense has certainly kind of carried them to this point. And obviously they've looked really good. Defense and offense really has looked really good in both of their matchups so far, or all three of their matchups, I should say, this year. So other side of the state, Idaho State homecoming in Pocatello this week. Another ranked team. This one is Utah State. Utah State's another team that's got to win over an FBS team. They beat UTEP. UTEP, obviously
Idaho
not
State.
the
You said Utah
Idaho
State.
State.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Idaho State. There you
Yeah.
go. Southern Utah beat UTEP. There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
So, but homecoming in Pocatello this weekend. So, it should be a fun weekend in Southeast Idaho.
Yeah, and I don't, we've talked about this before, but it's tough to know how good Idaho State is, specifically when they're doing stuff like, rolling different quarterbacks out. You are on game 3. You've given snaps to all kinds of quarterbacks, to all of them across the board. Unless somebody legitimately has not been if they've all been good, great. That's fine. But that doesn't mean you play everybody. I'm a critic. I want to be a critic right now to Coach Hawkins. I would propose you pick a guy. You got to play that guy and develop him, because if you don't continue to develop, you don't start the development process right now, at the end of the season, if you're going to just develop them all a little bit, they're all going to kind of go like this. You've got to get your guy at the top. You've got to get him to have the confidence in the rest of the team. If there's somebody that doesn't have it, that's a totally different story. But all the quarterbacks have shown to be pretty capable, and I think you've got to be able to pick one and run with him.
Yeah, it's kind of getting to that point where it kind of is time to pick one. I mean, last week they had 4 guys again, all on the sheet. Hunter Hayes was the one that popped up on the stat sheet the most. He was 18 of 23, threw for 4 touchdowns. Interesting thing, and this is where I think they're going to go with it. I think you're going to see Hunter Hayes in this game this week. I think you're going to see him. I think they're going to make that transition this week, and I think it's going to be Hunter Hayes. And I think it's going to be him because you have the rushing to go along with it. He was their leading rusher last week at North Dakota too. So he's not only got that rushing capability, and remember Cody Hawkins, that was what he did, right? When he was at Colorado and back here at Bishop Kelly. So I think you're going to see Hunter Hayes take that step. I think you're going to see him start to play more and more and probably take control of this offense, probably starting this week.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. You just have to pick a guy because, as is right now, it's tough to really rally around when you don't know who you're going to rally around. And I think that Hunter Hayes is that guy. He's a big guy. I mean, he's 6'4". It brings a lot. He has a lively arm. I've really liked his arm, but he's just a good athlete in general. And I think that if you are not dominant, and we've seen a lot of teams become really good with a really athletic quarterback. And I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson by any means. But what I am saying is that he can create with his legs. Kind of tough to bring down. Big, strong kid. Got to do something to move that engine forward.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you're sitting here now at a 1-2 record. I think we probably expected them to be 1-2 at this point of the year with the loss to Oregon State, win against Western Oregon, loss on the road against North Dakota, who's another ranked team, top 10 team in the FCS. So I think they were trying to just figure out what they were through these first 3 games, and I think I don't know if it's been the plan, but I think this is the game where you kind of see them find their identity a little bit more. That being said, it's still going to be a tough game, even though it's at home. Southern Utah's pretty good this year.
Yeah.
But interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, plus you don't want to burn all your red shirts if you don't have to, right? You get up to 4 games
Right.
played. So again, you've got to start whittling that down, knowing that you're going to go with probably 2 quarterbacks. To your point, this is game 3, and you should probably start doing that to start really thinking about that red shirt.
Yeah. Other interesting thing just about the schedule for ISU in this game. This is going to be the first time they played Southern Utah since they've left the Big Sky. North Dakota, also a former Big Sky team. So just kind of interesting to see how that scheduling and those relationships continue into the years beyond, even when teams switch conferences. Something to keep in mind as Boise State switches conferences, right?
Well, and some of the animosities. So being a fan of a team from southeast of Boise State, there was difficulty in scheduling some of the Mountain West teams, a little bit of a grudge, and they did not want to schedule a lot of it. So instead of having a Mountain West kind of affiliation for a while, and it ended up being a one-off scheduling type situation. We'll see if there's some grudge or some bitter feelings between Boise State and the Mountain West. Some of those teams, hey, you left us high and dry. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it just, I mean, it all depends on what happens, right? I mean, it could be the Mountain West just all comes over to the Pac-12. That could very well still happen. So, but I think, if it's something where like a Wyoming or something doesn't get in, I think you're going to start seeing Wyoming still pop up on those non-con schedules because geographically it makes sense. There's a relationship there between the ADs already. So I just think you're seeing that a little bit play out on Idaho State's schedule. Might be something to watch for as Boise State starts to play in its schedule, which, I mean, we're talking like these games happen in like 2031 or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they schedule those things so far out.
Right. Yeah. Yes, they do. So let's talk a little Colston Loveland here, tight end for Michigan. You saw just kind of right before we jumped on here some early NFL draft projections, and I'd been asked a couple times, where do you think he might go? And I kind of threw out 3rd, 4th round, maybe. No, it looks like he's going to go a little higher. How about round 1?
Yeah, round 1. I mean, he's a unique blend. The new age tight end, it's become such an accelerated position. You need that position. That guy has to be able to run, catch, and block. Like it's the full Monty. Now, Travis Kelce is he does a serviceable job blocking, but George Kittle's, he's like the consummate. Gronk. I mean, think of Gronk when he played. It has become such a key matchup situation across the board that you really have to have a specific type. And what you're seeing is Colston Loveland's really fitting into that nicely, especially playing in a pro era offense with Harbaugh at Michigan.
Yeah.
Michigan players translate really, really, or at least they translated through Harbaugh era really, really well to the NFL. NFL teams take notice of that. They really do, because Harbaugh develops players. I just saw an article today that, and this is probably going in way too much information for just one tiny comment, but Tom Brady, a while ago, Stephen A. Smith was interviewing, and he was saying how he's disappointed in the current college football situation. So what ends up happening is these aren't programs, they're college football teams. Tom Brady's saying this. He says you get him there, you get these young kids, and they put them in a system. They dumb down systems. They don't teach them. Here's your capability. Here's as good as you are. We're going to throw you into the system. So by the time you get to the NFL, you look at Bryce Young, who just got benched for Andy Dalton. Huge. That's massive, right?
Yeah,
former Heisman Trophy winner, #1 pick overall. Again, he came in with some question marks in terms of his size, some of the arm strength, that type of thing. But he just got benched, and for all intents and purposes, he's probably done in the NFL. I cannot see a situation where there's a resurgence of a career for Bryce Young. And Tom Brady's blaming that on the system. Michigan is the outlier to that. And that's why I'm saying Colston Loveland has been playing in this situation. Teams take notice. They've had projections number 28, and that's going to the Eagles. Dallas Goedert is getting old. They need to find a replacement, some young legs.
Yeah.
Number 31, they're saying to the 49ers, George Kittle's. That'd be phenomenal to be an understudy. Those are very similar athletic type players. You can see both. You can see him learning and growing in that type of situation. But he's projected from a mid to a late round, first round pick, as is only a few games into the season for Michigan.
Yeah, it's interesting how these projections come out because you think Eagles, Kellen Moore connection, right? There's somewhat of an Idaho tie there. I'm not saying they know each other. I'm just saying there is an Idaho tie there. And then the 49ers, my God, you want to talk about a perfect fit for the guy?
Wow. Oh, it'd be
yeah.
brilliant. Yeah. Oh, man.
That fit like a glove, man.
Well, and you don't, because you come in and look at these quarterbacks, right? Ideally, you would get drafted. You would sit a year or two behind it. Jordan Love in Green Bay. Jordan Love's a great example of that. Sit a few years, learn the system. You could come in and the expectations would be so minimal. I mean, positive in a good way, but you learn from George Kittle's, right?
Yeah.
You get when they go 21 sets and you have two tight ends. Loveland comes in. Otherwise, you're just learning the trick. Oh, you talk about glove. I love it.
And exactly how he started at Michigan, right? I mean, Michigan, and that's how he kind of started. And
True.
He played early at Michigan, and we kind of went, "What's that? Oh yeah, that is Loveland." And then you went, "Did he just catch a pass?" And then you went, "Did he just catch a touchdown against Ohio State?" and then his career just took off from there. So
well,
it's yeah.
You know what's funny is I wonder if he knows that he has a state cheering for him. Do you think he does?
Yeah.
I mean, it's somehow, Colson,
so.
if you hear this and your family or anybody, and you get this to him, just know, buddy, you have a whole state cheering for you.
Yep, without a doubt. And not only, I mean, it's not like he's from Boise, right? He's from Gooding, Idaho, right? So just adds to it, right? Kind of sticking with the NFL, Taysom Hill and the Saints are just on fire. This is the hottest offense in the NFL. And Taysom Hill is a huge part of it. Did pop on the injury report this week, though you're getting to the point now in the NFL season where everyone's on the injury report. So
that's the old Bill Belichick trick, right? Put him on the injury report so you don't know really who's injured, right? It's
yeah.
Yeah, so he went out. He had a chest injury. They took him to the hospital there, and he made the flight back. They were looking for a punctured lung, is what the rumor was, is that he had a punctured lung. Ended up just being chest bruise, contusion, chest contusion. Could be multiple things. But he was back practicing this week, and he should be active for this game.
Okay, nice. And how about the Saints? I mean, the NFC right now to me is wide open. And why not the Saints? I mean, they've looked good. Carr's delivering the ball, and you talked about Bryce Young getting benched. Sometimes when these high draft picks just get into a different situation, sometimes it can resurge their career a little bit. And sometimes these guys, like a Sam Darnold's kind of example of what I'm talking about here.
Yeah,
high draft pick, goes to the Jets in this big media market, doesn't really work out, and then he goes to what is now the Vikings, and now he's the starting quarterback for the Vikings, and probably is playing a role that he was probably fit to play the whole time.
Which is
a fringe starter and a backup quarterback.
Okay. Being forced in with the injury to J.J. McCarthy. I think if I'm McCarthy, that's probably you never want to get injured. Quite frankly, he had a meniscus repair. If it was just a meniscus tear, he could probably play through it, but it was a meniscus repair. He's probably in a better situation if he can learn a lot more, get another year of the system under his belt before he gets thrust into that starting position. I say look at Zach Wilson and that dumpster fire that is the Jets. I mean, that's terrible. If you get drafted by the Jets, and I don't know if you remember this, but the Chargers drafted Eli Manning, right?
Yeah.
And he held out and said, "I don't want to play." Because at the time they were a dumpster fire, so he held out. Ended up being traded, right? The Philip Rivers thing. So it worked out fine. It worked out fine for him. If I'm any quarterback getting drafted that high by the Jets, I say, hard pass. No thanks.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to that until that team is either sold or gutted or something. Like it's got to be redone. I mean, it's a blight on the NFL.
Or not playing in the New York market where they throw you to the wolves after you're throwing like one interception. You know what I mean? That media is brutal.
And look at Zach Wilson, right? He goes in there and I get it. He wasn't great in some of the throws, but all of a sudden you're like, well, I mean, Aaron Rodgers isn't looking amazing as well. There's a lot that goes into that. And you know what? If I'm Zach Wilson, I camp with the Broncos for a year or two, get a shot because somebody's going to give him a shot to be a starter again. And I think he has the ability to be a starter in the NFL.
Yep. Yeah, I think so as well. So, all right, that's going to about do it for us here tonight. Again, want to remind you, like, share, comments on the show if you're watching it right now. We would certainly appreciate it. Helps us get out to more viewers and helps us grow the show. I did have a couple people who I don't normally talk to all the time did say, "Hey, I saw you on this show. What's this about?" Sounds like we're growing. I don't know. We'll see.
Let's go.
All right, we'll see you next Thursday. We'll be back at it then. Have a good week.